I'm Alice Park, Times Senior Health Correspondent, and I'm pleased to welcome American Olympic and World Champion Allyson Felix. Allyson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Alice.
So we have so much to talk about, but let's start with the Olympics. You were preparing for your 5th Olympic Games when the pandemic hit, and they were postponed until next year. What was your first reaction when you heard about the postponement?
It was a lot, a lot of disappointment. I felt like I really had to take time to kind of grieve that loss. With the Olympics, it's something where you are training with such, to be ready for the exact moment, the exact second. And so when that's altered, it really takes a lot to kind of shift your mindset. But I think because the world was experiencing such enormous loss and kind of in all aspects, I think it really helped push me, obviously, to put things in perspective. But really, to understand that it was a real loss and things look different, and but trying to pick up the pieces and still be hopeful that it's not canceled, it's postponed.
How did it change your training regimen, the schedule of training that you had planned?
Yeah, it had a huge impact on that, especially being that there was such really no races to be had. And so we had to get very creative with even where we were training because, all the tracks were shut down. And so we did a lot of training in my own neighborhood and kind of streets around my house and empty fields and, did all of that. And then we tried to keep on with the regular schedule. So we still tried to really have an intense training regimen all the way up. I'm still training right now. And then we'll shut down and kind of regroup and go back to training. So really trying to keep to that Olympic schedule as if they would have happened, but really being smart and backing off a bit just to give my body a break so that I can be at my best for next year.
And I want to talk now about some of the things that have happened in recent months where you've become not only an elite athlete, of course, but also a very vocal advocate. And you wrote that I've always known that expressing myself could hurt my career. That's a pretty big statement, and it really captures how professional athletes are perceived in this country. The idea that you should just stick to sports. Can you talk about where this perception came from? Was it something that you were ever explicitly told or something that you just picked up on during your years as an athlete?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything that you're necessarily told, but I think as an athlete, it's what you see. I think time and time again, we have seen athletes be really outspoken, and then you see the consequences. I mean, we see what has happened to Colin Kaepernick, and it's very real. And so I think a lot of athletes feel like not all of us are in the same position and not everyone can do that because we take care of families and a lot of people depend on us. And so to kind of jump out of that lane of where you feel like you need to stay, it takes a lot. And I think you really have to be all in with that. And so I think everyone's kind of journey and place with that is different. But for me, it really came to a point where I felt like I just needed to. I felt like I deeply believed in, some of the things I was going through and experiencing. And I felt like I had the ability to at least have some impact and to share my story.
And you did share your story specifically about pay equity during your contract negotiations with Nike. What was at stake for you, and why, as you said, did you feel like you had to speak at that point?
Yeah, for me, I felt like pretty much everything was at stake because I, had been with Nike for around almost 9 years, and I was branded as such a Nike athlete. And there wasn't anything else on the table for me. So in walking away and in speaking out, I wasn't sure if there was going to be another sponsorship opportunity. And so it was really scary, in such a large company. But for me, it was so important because it wasn't just a Nike issue. This was an industry-wide problem that was happening where there wasn't protection in contracts for female athletes surrounding maternity. And so other colleagues of mine, Kara Goucher, Alicia Montano, had spoke out. And I just felt deeply moved to join them. I felt like I had to, regardless of, if I lost everything. It needed to happen because ever since I came into the sport, I saw that there was this this issue and this silence around women and starting families. It wasn't right.
The whole idea of women professional athletes like yourself, and even in other fields, being able to start families has always been something that women have balanced and have dealt with. Why do you think that all of these issues are resonating now?
I guess I can speak for myself. I think the fact that women are being more vulnerable and they're sharing their stories, there's something so powerful about that. I think because when you are sitting there in silence and you're going through something, you feel lonely and you feel isolated and you feel like it's just you. But when one woman starts to speak up, there's power in that collective. And so I think we are feeling that. I think it's a special time where we're just sharing what we're going through. And I think once one, a woman steps up, that gives courage for another one to join. And even if it's not the exact same issue, there's still power in that.
And the fact that there were differences in the way female athletes were being treated at companies like Nike, I think it came to us as a surprise to a lot of people. Did it come as a surprise to you?
I don't think it came as such a surprise to me just because of the situation that I was going through. But I think what was more surprising was just what we were seeing marketed, the campaigns that were gripping. I think we've all been moved by those campaigns. And as athletes, I think that we do have the responsibility to hold these companies and these brands accountable for what they're putting out, because we're looking to the next generation and we're telling them that, they can do anything, and we need to back that up, and they need to be supported.
And you've also testified before Congress about racial disparities when it comes to maternal mortality. And the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, has really laid bare the health equities that break down along racial and socioeconomic lines in this country. What are some of the ways that you've seen that we can potentially address that and bring more equity to those disparities?
Yeah, I'm definitely still new. My conviction around this came when I gave birth to my daughter at 32 weeks with a severe case of preeclampsia. And my eyes were just kind of open to this whole new world. And so what I'm seeing is that, women of color they're not being heard, they're not being believed. And there's a problem in that. And we're seeing implicit bias, in the healthcare system, especially surrounding, giving birth and what that looks like. And so I think what I'm trying to do is raise awareness, because for myself, I felt like I knew the statistics, but I still didn't ever see myself in this situation. And because of that, I didn't feel prepared. And I'm not sure if anyone really ever feels prepared for, a scary, traumatic situation like that. But I felt like I could have known what to look for and what questions, to keep asking my doctor. And I think that's what it's about. It's empowering women to be able to walk into a doctor's office and not feel intimidated and raise these questions. And in some cases, to stay on them and have people, their support systems do the same. And I think in this era of COVID-19, a bad situation, sometimes we're seeing it get even worse, with support systems not all being allowed in the delivery room, doulas and things that really help women in these areas. And so it's becoming an even larger issue.
And in some ways, do you hope that the pandemic sort of focuses people on those disparities and hopefully forces people to confront them and address them?
I do. I think it's really shining a light on these disparities. And I think it is going to force people to want to do more. And I think that's something that we're feeling kind of, I don't know, for myself, I feel like it's different right now, the way that people are listening to each other, and we're trying to see other perspectives. And I think that, yes, this pandemic has really shown that, even with a lot of offices moving to telehealth. And we see that, the women who are most likely to be at risk for complications, they don't always have access to that. And so there's so many new issues that are coming up that have to be addressed. And I think that we are starting to focus on those.
And you've also recently signed on to More Than a Vote, a campaign launched by LeBron James to encourage Black Americans to vote in the upcoming election. What are some of the ways that this group can help to accomplish that, do you think?
Yeah, I think really these athletes and entertainers who have come together, they have a platform. And I think we're just saying that we want to use that platform. You know, we want better for our communities and we want them to understand, you know, what they have at their disposal, how to get out there and vote, how to do that early, and really to just help share that message and doing our part. I think it's just getting out of just that lane of performance and really I think we all just want better, you know, and I think this is another way to do that.
Has that transition been challenging at times, to find your voice in addressing issues outside of your sport?
Yeah, it's definitely still strange. I feel like I never would have referred to myself in that way, just because naturally, I don't think it's taken a journey, I would say, to find my voice. And so I'm still getting comfortable with that. But I think the way that I define it is wanting better and wanting to do something about, you know, some of these issues. And I feel like having my daughter was that final push that I needed to get to this place because I just start to think about the world that she's going to grow up in. And I don't want her to have these same fights and battles, you know, that we've all experienced. And so just wanting to do whatever I can.
When you look back at your previous Olympics and now as you're training for the upcoming one as a mother for the first time, what are the differences? How are you different both as an athlete and as a human being training for this Olympics versus your perhaps even first one?
I'm a lot more tired this time around, but it's so amazing just the shift in motivation. I've always been this extremely competitive athlete, and I've just from being a little child, I've had a desire to win, and I think now the reason why has shifted, and I want to show Cameron how to overcome adversity and give her a real life picture of what it looks like, when you have to keep fighting and when you work hard and you want everything to come together, it doesn't always happen. And so just explaining all those things, and I can't wait to even share with her the last couple of years and the journey that we've been on together and what all that means. And so it's a hard balance for sure. I think like any working parent to kind of figure out what works. And I have my days where I feel like I'm thriving as an athlete and failing at home. So I'm still trying to figure it out, but I have a great support system, a great family who really is helping me to have an opportunity to go for this fifth Olympic team.
And is she able to be there with you as you're training and during workouts and things like that?
Yeah, before the safer at home orders, she would frequently come to practice, and it's actually a really cool thing because I'm going through these really intense, really difficult training sessions, and sometimes I'll just kind of peek over and I'll see her, and it's like seeing your motivation in the flesh, and it's a really special thing.
Since you've become such a role model for young women around the country, I wanted to ask you about the impact that the pandemic is having, obviously, on college programs and a lot of athletes who really look forward to the school year for competitions and races, and as you said, that sense of camaraderie. Can you talk a little bit about how you see this pandemic affecting the pipeline of athletes who are going to be looking toward the next Olympic Games and what impact this might have on them?
Yeah, I mean, my heart really does break for those athletes who are missing out time and who aren't able to be with their teammates and who are not having those seasons because it's a lot. I think they really depend on that. And I know how special those moments are and those relationships are. And so it's going to have a big effect on them. And I think that, obviously health is the most important and everyone is, has that mindset to put them in the best situation. I think when sport does return fully, I think it's going to be a real time of bringing people together. And I think sport has always had that power to unify and to be bigger than whatever the performance is. But I think that when we see the Olympics return, I think it's going to be far more than that because on a global stage, I think we're going to feel that. And I think we all need that more than ever.
And as you said, these are such unprecedented times that we're living in, not just because of the pandemic, but because of what we've seen here in the United States surrounding the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the advocacy that we've seen around Black Lives Matter. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how that has also impacted you and your family?
Yeah, I know for myself, I have had just a heavy heart. I think especially being the mother to a Black child, and with George Floyd, to hear him crying out for his mother, I mean, that is something that is just heart-wrenching. So I've had definitely some really difficult days, and just even thinking as my daughter grows up, and the conversations that I'll have to have with her, and the tools that I'll have to give her to navigate this world. It's a really sobering reality, but I think at the same time, being a Black mother is also a privilege, and the heritage is very strong. And so I feel encouraged by that. And I also feel encouraged and hopeful by the allies and the diversity that we're seeing. And I think people are pausing, and they're taking a second to really educate themselves and listen to others. And it's a time that it feels like we're very divided, but at the same time, there's these moments that are hopeful. And so for my family, I think we've been out there, marching. I've tried to use my voice, and we tried to even educate ourselves more, and just do what we can, because it's a very big moment. I think we want to turn a big moment into progress.
And are you hopeful that we'll see that progress? A lot of people have talked so much about how this is not new, and we tend to go through these cycles, and we see these incidents come up, and then there's sort of white hot attention focused on it, and then it sort of wanes away. Are you hopeful that this time will be different?
I am. I think I have some tough days where it feels like, man, we're not going anywhere. But this does feel different. I feel like we are continuing to put pressure. We're continuing to make sure that, Breonna Taylor is still in the spotlight. And I think we are going to, that's something that's not going to go away. And so I do hope that that there is change that comes from this moment that we're all feeling.
Your accomplishments and your career are a beacon for so many young women. What would you like to pass on to them about what you've learned, both as an athlete and an advocate?
It's a good question. I think as I kind of think back over, the journey that I've been on, I think it's about really embracing everything. For a lot of my earlier career, I focused so intensely on winning gold medals, and that's how I define success. And I wish that I would have been able to kind of embrace the failures as well more. I think as I got older, I was able to, but I would love to pass on to that next generation that there's always an opportunity to learn. That in those moments where you feel like you missed the mark, those are times where you stretch and you grow, and those are really, really special opportunities. And you got to take all that in. And around, advocacy, I guess I would say just always speak your truth. Not to feel like you have to be confined into one space. We as people have so much to offer, and that includes athletes. You have more to offer than just your talent in your specific field. And so I would just encourage them always to speak their truth.
And I have to ask, as we look toward Tokyo for next year, what are the goals that you're setting for yourself?
The biggest goal, for me, it would be a joy to make my 5th Olympic team and to be able to come home with some gold medals. But I think that's not the only way I'm defining success these days. I think being able to have my daughter there, that would be a huge win for me. And to just be able to have moments in the stadium with her and to share that journey with her. And so I'm just looking forward to that opportunity.
Allyson, thank you for joining us for Time 100 Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.